In rock and roll, you've got your superstars, and then you have forces of nature. Neil Young, well, he has always been a force of nature. For 6 decades, he's been one of music's most fiercely independent and influential artists, just consistently following his own path, no matter where it took him. And his whole story, really, it can be summed up by one single idea. This right here, this single quote is the key. It's the key to understanding his entire career. It's this declaration of independence that has defined his every move, from his earliest days right up to his legendary status today. It's a promise, really, a promise to himself and to us, that he will always be, without compromise, Neil Young. So, where does a journey like that even begin? Well, for that, we have to go back to the start, all the way back to the vast landscapes of Canada, where a quiet, determined kid started down a path that would, honestly, change music forever. These early events were they were profoundly shaping. I mean, getting polio at age 5, that left a lasting physical and psychological mark. And then moving to Winnipeg with his mom after his parents' divorce, that really fostered this sense of being an outsider, a loner. And that feeling, it would fuel his music and lead him right to forming his first real band, the Squires. This quote, it is so revealing. Even as a teenager in Winnipeg, Neil's ambition was just completely off the charts. For him, music wasn't some hobby, it was a calling. He had this singular focus that really set him apart from everyone else. And you get this sense he was willing to do whatever it took to get where he wanted to go. And that determination, it showed up in other ways too. Here's a great little story. The band needed a microphone for a gig they couldn't afford. So what does Neil do? He goes to a local synagogue, finds an empty banquet hall, and just borrows the mic for the night. It's a fantastic story that just perfectly reveals the kind of resourcefulness that would define his entire career. But Neil's ambition was way too big for Winnipeg. The real dream, the big dream, was in Los Angeles. And his ticket there? A 1948 Buick hearse he called Mort. I mean, that's an iconic image that just perfectly captures the strange and winding road that lay ahead. What happened next is one of those stories that's so perfect it almost feels like it has to be a myth. But it's true. He's stuck in LA traffic, and Stephen Stills, who Neil had met briefly back in Canada, spots the Canadian license plate on this old hearse. Stills just knew it had to be Neil. He and Richie Furay ran over, and right there in the middle of Sunset Boulevard, Buffalo Springfield was born. I mean, talk about destiny. And the rise of Buffalo Springfield was absolutely explosive. In just a few months, they went from a chance meeting in a traffic jam to being one of the hottest bands in LA. They were playing legendary clubs, touring with their heroes, and then, bam, they score a generation-defining hit with For What It's Worth. It was the dream come true. But, and here's the twist, just as the band hits the peak of mainstream success, Neil pulls back. The idea of playing the game, of showing up on a TV show like Johnny Carson, was completely against his nature. Even at this early stage, his rebellious, fiercely independent spirit just couldn't be contained. You could see right then that the band was doomed. So after Buffalo Springfield fell apart, Neil sets out on his own. This next phase, this is where he would achieve his greatest commercial success, a level of fame that would make him a household name. But it would also trigger a crisis that would lead him to create some of his most challenging and brilliant music. Right away, he established this powerful new persona. On his very first solo album, the song The Loner wasn't just a title, it was a mission statement. It defined him as this solitary, mysterious figure, an identity he has pretty much carried with him his entire life. And then came Harvest. With its gentle acoustic sound and the massive #1 single, Heart of Gold, the album made Neil Young one of the biggest stars on the planet. For a moment, it really seemed like the loner had found a comfortable home right there in the middle of the road. But that kind of fame, it made him deeply uncomfortable. So instead of capitalizing on it, he famously said he headed for the ditch, completely rejecting the soft folk rock sound that had made him a superstar. He literally ran away from the spotlight as fast as he could. What followed was one of the most famously uncommercial periods in rock history. Fueled by personal grief and just this wider sense of disillusionment with the faded promise of the 60s, Neil released a series of albums that were raw, challenging, and deeply, deeply personal. Albums that totally alienated his new fans, but became absolutely legendary. This created a massive disconnect. The audience was begging for a Harvest Part 2, but instead, Neil gave them the musical equivalent of an open wound. You see, he wasn't making music for them anymore. He was making it because he had to, as a way to process the darkness that was all around him. And this became the legendary Ditch trilogy. You've got Time Fades Away, a live album so ragged he refused to release it on CD for decades. Then, On the Beach, a masterpiece of paranoia and despair. And most famously, Tonight's the Night, this harrowing tequila-soaked tribute to his fallen friends that was so raw his record label initially refused to even release it. So, after emerging from that really dark period, Neil Young established a new philosophy, a mantra that would guide him through the 80s, the 90s, and all the way to today. He decided that the only way forward was through constant, relentless change. And that whole philosophy was captured in 3 perfect words: Rust never sleeps. It became his artistic creed, the idea that you must always be moving, always experimenting, and always risking failure. Because for Neil, the only true failure is to stand still and just fade away. And his main method of reinvention was just embracing his own duality. The album Rust Never Sleeps captures this perfectly. It's famously split right down the middle. One side is gentle and acoustic, and the other is just a full-on electric assault with his legendary band Crazy Horse. He contained multitudes, and he refused to choose just one. Now, this commitment to change reached its most extreme point in the 1980s. He jumped from an electronic album full of robotic vocoder vocals to a traditional country record to a big band blues album. His label, Geffen Records, was so frustrated they actually sued him for making music that was unrepresentative of Neil Young. Think about that. He was sued for not being himself, when in reality, he was being more himself than ever before. And all of this defiance, this relentless integrity, was captured in this one iconic line. It became an anthem for artists everywhere. It was famously quoted in Kurt Cobain's Suicide Note, which cemented Neil's status as the godfather of grunge and made him a hero to a whole new generation who saw him as the ultimate symbol of artistic purity. When you really look at it, Neil Young's 6-decade journey is so much more than a rock and roll story. It's a powerful lesson in artistic survival. And his career leaves us with a pretty big question, right? In a world that's constantly pushing us to fit in and build a brand, what's the real value of raw, messy, uncompromising authenticity? For Neil Young, it's the only thing that has ever mattered.